Welcome back to Trinity Place for the second Sunday of Epiphany. A love that never ceases, a creativity that designed the universe, a hope that cannot be quenched, a pursuit of reconciliation no matter the cost. These are the things that are of God. Then let us open our hearts and our minds to know the Holy. Welcome back to Trinity Place. If you are listening to this sermon out of the context of our worship video, the readings which I'm going to incorporate are from 1 Samuel, the calling of Samuel, and Psalm 139, and then Lee Young Lee poem, which I'm going to read to you, and John's, in the Gospel of John, the calling of Philip and Nathaniel. All those are part of this and part of the lectionary, except for this Lee Young Lee poem, which we add here, a contemporary reading each week, called Have You Prayed by Lee Young Lee. When the wind turns and asks in my Father's voice, have you prayed? I know three things. One, I'm never finished answering to the dead. Two, a man is four winds and three fires, and the four winds are his father's voice, his mother's voice. Or maybe he's seven winds and 10 fires, and the fires are seeing, hearing, touching, dreaming, thinking. Or is he the breath of God? When the wind turns traveler and asks in my Father's voice, have you prayed? I remember three things. One, a father's love is milk and sugar. 2/3 worry, 2/3 grief, and what's left over is trimmed and leavened to make the bread, the dead, and the living share. And patience, that's to endure the terrible leavening and kneading. And wisdom, that's my Father's face in sleep. When the wind asks, have you prayed? I know it's only me. Reminding myself a flower is one station between earth's wish and earth's rapture, and blood was fire, salt, and breath, long before it quickened any wand or branch, any limb that woke speaking. It's just me in the gowns of the wind, or my Father through me asking, have you found your refuge yet? Asking, are you happy? Strange. A troubled father, a happy son, the wind with a voice, and me talking to no one. Lee Young Lee has been described by some as mystical, or at least his poetry. I met him once. He reminded me of my own father in his extreme degree of introversion. He was very shy until he found out I am a minister. You see, Lee's father was a doctor who became a minister, Presbyterian. His father had once been Mao Zedong's personal physician before his family had to flee China. Long story short, and this biographical note has nothing whatsoever to do with the larger sermon, but it's interesting. Lee's poetry often features his father or the memory of the father or his father's voice in his head. His poems feature silence, long breaks between lines, and they do not necessarily make rational sense in the same way that the beginning of John's Gospel fails to make sense. You know, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and so on and so forth. And by the way, one of the places Lee Young Lee studied was SUNY Brockport, so we can call him a homeboy the way that 3 or 4 states claim Abe Lincoln. But all of this about Lee Young Lee is because I thought I might need to soften you up a little bit in case his poem left you scratching your head. And with me, that can make me a little grumpy. So with that, here is the dialogue between poets and clarions from today. You have searched me out and known me, the psalmist says to God. You trace my journeys and my resting places, and you're acquainted with all my ways. How deep I find your thoughts, O God, how great is the sum of them. If I were to count them all, they would be more in number than the sand. To count them all, my lifespan would need to be like yours. So speak, beloved, Samuel finally says. Speak, because now, after a long time of dismissing your voice, denying that you could actually be calling me, I'm listening, and now I can hear you. Have you prayed yet? God's voice, riding upon the wind, inquires. Remember, the poets write, a father's love, by which he may mean God, is milk and sugar, 2/3 worry, 2/3 grief, and what's left over is trimmed and leavened to make the bread the dead and the living share. Then follow me, Jesus invites, and we will make this bread together and share this bread forever. And some claim over and over that they have seen angels ascending and descending up and down like an escalator from heaven upon this man Jesus, then and now and over and over and over again. Let's just rest with that dialogue as if we were the verses of a Lee Young Lee poem. So, I'm hoping what happened there, as you listen to me read the fantasy dialogue, is that you could fall into it, just go with it and feel it. Feel the poetic, maybe mystical edge of the voices and realize the softness of them. Because I think we read them like we do in church, one reading after another from ancient voices that we can no longer hear. So they feel hard, they feel square, as if justified margins with defined edges. We listen, but not really, unless something within them snags our attention for a second, but usually it's for a negative reason. But in dialogue with the poets and the clarions, quietly and sort of serenely talking to each other, their softness emerges. Even if and where they make no sense, something arises out of the dialogue that makes sense. Maybe only in the way that the voice of memory, the memory of someone long dead, makes sense when it pops into our heads apropos of nothing. One Sunday, Grant Holly appears as we sing. Or Bunny Bell makes a comment in your thoughts. Or Sue Saban or her husband Howard or your own father or your own mother on the wind of memory whispers something. That kind of softness. These are the strains upon which the voice of God speaks, and we either hear or don't hear. Now, if we're Pentecostals, we could claim loud bangs of revelation and clanging songs of the holy, racking our bodies, incarnate in our bodies until we can't stand it anymore. But we are not Pentecostals. We are liturgicals. We get our leavened holiness in words sung or spoken and bread eaten and shared. It's weird, of course, but we like it that way. Every once in a while, it is important to stop and witness what we're doing, which is what this sermon is. We are trying to find the poetry of God's voice. The poetry of God's voice carried on the voices of others, the ancient poets and clarions, as well as a few modern ones. Like Samuel, we have to listen because the voice isn't who or what or where we thought it was. We have to go back again and again and again and again in disbelief before we can say to ourselves, oh, it wasn't who I thought it was. And then stop and open up and listen. And that's what we're doing here. Stopping. Opening up. Listening. Wait, we say, when the thin voice whispers through our lives like an unexpected breeze, and finally we hear it. Where did you get to know me? Where did you get to know me? Nathaniel wants to know. It feels kind of creepy to him that this stranger he has never met seems to know what he feels and what he thinks without ever saying it before. And we know that creepy, maybe compelling feeling too, because we hear that wind or receive that memory or acknowledge that whisper that has us pegged when we didn't want to be pegged, when we prefer to be unknown even to ourselves. That niggling moment when we didn't want to be vulnerable, but some voice inside sees us for who we are and says so. You know the experience I'm talking about, don't you? Well, when we enter into dialogue like this with the readings, it can release some voices like bats scattered from under the curtains. Up they come, and we feel or hear or think stuff we hadn't necessarily wanted to receive, but can grudgingly appropriate. All of that is why we're here. All of that is what the liturgy can do for us. We come to it wanting solace only and not strength, wanting forgiveness only and not renewal. But all kinds of things come back to us in the sharing of bread with the living and the dead. It isn't always what we want or what feels good, but that is its power. On the wind of the liturgy, memories and voices and a whole nest of stuff is awakened and shaken free. It seems so staid when we come here, and orderly and controlled, when in fact it's open. It is opening Pandora's box of our own lives that God wants us contending with. It's our quiet kind of Pentecostalism. Have you prayed? It may be that these kinds of readings and this kind of sermon sticks in your craw rather than soothes your soul, but that's what liturgy can do and should do. It may be that this format of speaking and preaching is disconcerting in its strangeness or in its in-between-the-lines logic or what may seem like a lack of logic. But that's what liturgy can do, should do. Have you prayed yet? If you're listening to this online, out of the context of liturgy, it may not have made any sense whatsoever. But then again, it may. Either way, I wish you peace. Peace be with you. Thanks for being here. Goofy. That was really good, Lisa, by the way.